Hey guys, Omerko here, self-taught web developer. As we worked in my last video with HTTP module in Angular, we used something called observables. Through this video right now, we will take a look into those observables much deeper. So, we will first see what are the observables, we will talk more about the observables in Angular specifically, and I will show you the, simple examples of observables, how can you use those, what you can do with observables, and also how can you create your own observables in Angular. First of all, let's see what are observables. We mostly use observables to pass our data between parts of our application because those are providing us with deeper support. To make a basic so-called statement of the observable, those are just wrappers for our data. So observable itself will wrap our data, and through that wrapper of that observable, we will be able to, customize our data to catch some errors or even modify data as we wish, and that data, modified data, would be returned to us from observable wrapper. By saying that, in my last video of HTTP module, we worked a bit with observables. For example, here in my data service.typescript file, we used this get to do method, which essentially returned whatever we could from this JSON placeholder URL, which returned to us one to do with the ID of 1. As we use this HTTP client, HTTP module that belongs to Angular, that always returned to us the observable itself. Now, as this get method will obviously return that observable, in our app component where we are running that get method, here we were able to subscribe to that get method because we are subscribing to observable. Essentially, we would get some response back, which is this to do, or we could get some error, and here we could handle our error. For my example, I just logged the error if that would even occurred. Now, to show you the observables and how could they modify data. So here on my data service where I'm returning the value here, I don't need to return the whole value here and subscribe here. So still I will subscribe in my app component.typescript file, but in my data service here, instead of returning this, I could use this method called pipe. Pipe itself will give us the option to run different methods on our observable. For example, one of those options would be our map method. This map method should be also imported, so import map from rxjs, which is the library for the observables, / operators, because map itself is the operator. Here, map expects some data or some response. So once it gets that response, we can do something with this response. So for example, here I could return the object of my data. For me, I will return the title, which will be response.title, which should show the error because the title doesn't exist on the object of response because we didn't specify the type. So for this example, I will use response and set the type of any. Now we shouldn't see the error on the title. And also I will return the ID of response.id. So to show you this, I will also log them in my map, so console.log response here, and also where I'm getting my data in my app component, this to do, I will console log the response, so console.log response. Now, in my application, we do have two logs here in my console. Still, the data will be rendered on a screen. So, the first log will show all the data of that API of the response that we get, which will contain completed value, ID, title, and user ID. But as we use the map on our observable, we modified that data and essentially we returned just the ID and the title. So here in my data service where I'm getting the whole data, I'm returning only this data here, so title and the ID, without that user ID and completed value. So now I can remove this complete console log And on my app component here, my to-do will hold just those two values. So I was able to modify my data just for my needs. Also, next to this map, we could well bind different methods. For example, I could use comma here and use catch error method, which should be imported again from rxjs/observables. So this catch error method will hold some error obviously. And this error at the end will just, for me, should handle the error, but for me I will just return the error itself. So with this we will catch error in front and we will be able to notify our user about that error. So now at this point we are catching the error twice in my app component and also data service. There are many other methods that we could use on Observable, but this is one of the simple examples for the observable. How could you modify the data using the pipe itself? To create our own observables, here in my app component, I will create one more property, for example, new to do. This new to do will have the value initially. So here I will use off method, which should be imported from rxjs. This off method will offer us to create the observable for us. Otherwise, we could even use from method. This from method will create the observable from some input data. I will use off here because I'm not using any kind of input data. And here I will create the observable of, for example, title should be new to do. And let's use the ID, which should be set to 2, for example. So now, as we have this new to do observable, in my ng-on init, just below my data service here, I will be able to use this .new to do and to subscribe to that. Once I subscribe to this here, I will be able, for example, to get the response. I will set the response to any to type of any, and here I will just console.log my response. So here, and also as we were able to get the error here on my get to do, we are also able to do the same for our new to do. Checking my screen right now, we are able to see this log at the top. The log itself will log the title of new to do and the ID of 2. It is because we created the observable of our data of new to do data and ID of this whole object. And in our application we are subscribing to that data. So we created our own observable and we subscribe to that. Similarly, we could even use pipe here and modify that data as we used similarly with our getToDo method here. So now, one thing to notice here, we are using this getToDo and also this new to do where we are subscribing to. Here in our data service we are using HTTP module for that getToDo, and here we are using direct off observable that we are creating. These two types of observable that we are currently using, those are observables directly created with RxJS itself. Which means that these two, the RxJS off method and also the HTTP module itself, will handle observables properly. So at the end, once we destroy our component, those will also unsubscribe from our observables and prevent any memory leaks. But if you plan to use subject or behavior subject from Angular, you should unsubscribe from those manually. Neither subject or behavior subject would unsubscribe from your observables. They are there just to create those observables and to follow up with the data which should be emitted to them. So once you destroy your component, you should unsubscribe from those to prevent any memory leaks. With this example of observables, you grasped at least the basics of those. And starting from the next video in this Angular Essentials series, we will work with Angular routing. So I hope that you liked what you saw through this video. If you did, please click like and subscribe as I'm posting new content weekly. Thank you once again, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.